The golden age of Hollywood was a fantastic era between the 20s and 50s, when some of the most influential stars were made and some of the greatest films produced. But all that came crashing down when the studio system inevitably collapsed under its own weight from complications due to rampant alcoholism and pesky antitrust laws. The old actors drank like fishes while attending posh parties every evening. A lot of them even drank on set, when they drove, or virtually any other time they weren't asleep or showering. These days, that kind of excess and recklessness is hardly as acceptable as it once was. That's not to say there aren't celebs with drinking problems, but the culture of the past probably would just have called those people fun and not necessarily problematic. In this video, we're going to take a look at some of the most celebrated and beloved superstars from yesteryear who couldn't seem to put the bottle down. In the process, you'll get a chance to see just how insane the levels of hedonism and reckless abandon got during that golden age. Hopefully, we can take these examples as a precautionary warning so we don't also succumb to such a fate. Humphrey Bogart. Depending on which studio publicist you listen to, Humphrey Bogart either got his signature scar above his lip in a fistfight as a kid, after being decked by a prisoner being transported when he was a sailor in the Navy, or after taking shrapnel during a battle while he was a crewman on the USS Leviathan. But if you asked his old drinking buddies, they'd tell you Humphrey got the scar during one of his countless drunken barroom brawls when he used to frequent the Prohibition-era illicit drinking establishments of New York City. While he was honing his craft as a Broadway actor, Bogart became infamous for drinking until he was no longer conscious at a bar. Whenever someone tried to wake him, he would always be quick to try to pick a fight. His violent tendencies, coupled with his drinking habits, got him kicked out of more than one stage production. But that didn't stop him from gaining enough recognition to eventually make the move to Hollywood. Bogart settled in the notorious Garden of Allah, a housing development that became synonymous with its raucous clientele and the 24-hour lounge that served them even when other bars refused to. Bogart had quite the crew of drinking buddies to get into trouble with. Some of his closest companions included director John Huston, his lover Lauren Bacall, and old Blue Eyes himself, Frank Sinatra. It was actually Bogart that formed the first incarnation of the Rat Pack. Despite all the hardship that drinking brought into his life, Bogart cheekily claimed to only have gone on the wagon once, claiming that experience was the worst afternoon of his life. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, make sure you give it a like and subscribe to Facts Verse if you haven't already. And stay tuned to learn which Hollywood star was known for being a lovable drunk. Errol Flynn. On screen, he was known for being a charismatic madcap, and in real life, he was known to be an even more charismatic womanizer. Flynn is forever remembered for being one of the original Hollywood bad boys. His drug and alcohol abuse, sex life, and party-hard mentality made him something of a legend. Some of his drunken exploits included getting wasted with a pre-rebellion Fidel Castro, getting the Warner Lot bar shut down by Mr. Warner himself because Flynn kept getting tipsy on set, bringing a doctor's bag with him to work every day containing 2/5 of vodka, and having a bachelor pad with David Niven in Malibu that earned the nickname Cirrhosis by the Sea. Sadly, that nickname proved prophetic, because in 1959, at the age of 50, Flynn died after having a heart attack induced by acute cirrhosis of the liver. Clara Bow. At times, it's almost impossible to deduce which of the tales surrounding the classic stars are real and which are just exaggeration, studio spin, and the overactive imaginations of their fans. Clara Bow knew this truth all too well. Quite a few nasty rumors and salacious stories were spread about her that were unequivocally not true. There was an article printed in the Coastal Times newspaper that accused her of all sorts of things not based on real evidence. They tried to paint her as bisexual, which back then was kind of a big deal, who frequently slept with prostitutes and even engaged in acts of bestiality. Kenneth Anger further desecrated her public image by making the claim in his controversial book Hollywood Babylon that Clara would routinely sexually service the entire USC football team after games. Of course, this claim was equally as dubious, but back then there were no fact-checking sites to debunk such lies. But even though she had quite a few awful things printed about her that weren't based in reality, she did live quite the extravagant life and was often spotted at bars heavily intoxicated, where she would often go home with married men. She wasn't a saint by any means and developed such a wild reputation as she did, largely because of her lavish and hedonistic lifestyle. W.C. Fields. William Claude Dukenfield was born above a bar during pre-Prohibition times. When the government cracked down on booze and made it illegal, the young drunk stashed thousands of bottles of whiskey and gin in his attic. Even after Prohibition was lifted, he still continued to keep an abundant supply of emergency liquor in his home, just in case. While on set, Fields would always carry a vacuum flask filled with gin martinis that he would call his lemonade. Humorously, there was one time that somebody swapped out his gin with actual lemonade, prompting Fields to furiously cry out, "Who put lemonade in my lemonade?" Spencer Tracy. When Tracy got drunk, he was known to get very mean. Everyone knew he had a tendency towards violence when he hit the bottle, and he hit it a lot. He often got himself into heated bar fights, got arrested, and one time woke up in a padded room in a Chicago mental hospital. This two-time Oscar winner wasn't necessarily drunk all the time. He'd stay sober for long stretches of time, but eventually would find his way back to the liquor store. He would often hole up in hotel rooms for weeks on end. He spent a lot of his time soaking in the bathtub, sipping on drinks, not even getting up to relieve himself. Tracy's drinking eventually got so bad that Fox threatened to fire him if he didn't quit. In response, Tracy stormed out of the office and walked to the bar across the street. After getting hammered, he returned to the office and proceeded to make a scene. Tracy was fired by Fox but landed a contract with MGM not long after. But since the studio already knew about his drinking, they hired a crew they called the Tracy Squad, whose duty it was to babysit the unpredictable binge drinker. Peter O'Toole. Spencer Tracy may have been the quintessential example of a sad drunk, but Peter was known for being a charming, fun-loving goofball of a drunk. The Lawrence of Arabia star was reportedly a riot to be around while off-set. While he was younger, he apparently lived aboard a barge that sunk because there were too many people attending a party he threw. Then, when getting married to his wife Shawn, he decided to forego a traditional reception and instead go on an absurdly elaborate pub crawl. And when she gave birth to their first child, Peter showed up very inebriated with a full chorus of his equally drunk actor friends, who proceeded to sing for the whole hospital. Peter would often get drunk and wake up in strange, unexpected places. Once he found himself in Mexico with no recollection of the evening before. Another time, he and Michael Caine were roused by a furious occupant of an apartment whom they had never seen before. One of the most famous of his drinking tales was the time he accidentally cut the tip of one of his fingers off while drinking. First, he tried to use brandy to sterilize the wound. He attempted to reattach the finger himself before finishing the bottle of brandy. A couple of weeks later, he unwrapped the bandage to figure out why it still hurt, only to find that not only did the finger not somehow miraculously reattach, but he also put it on backwards. Now it's time to hear from you. Do you think that the stars back then partied harder than modern celebrities? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. And before you go, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to Facts Verse if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content.